Nebula's 3rd Division headquarters, 3rd Division lounge. Lots of people were coming out and in through the doors. The man behind the door exclaimed that the mission was completed and everything went smoothly. The person said that Ruko Zong is really a good leader to rely on. Ruko walked with his hands in his pants pockets. Above his head, you can see that he is level 25. People surrounded him. One person said that they wanted him to go to the dungeon with them for 1 hour to help them. Another person said that they were missing one strong T in the team. Ruko agreed and told him to just text him when the time came. Dialogue prompt, T, short for tank. As a subclass of the warrior class, they are essentially a meat shield, defined by their high HP and high defensive stats. Their role is to absorb damage for the team and to attract the attention of dangerous boss-level enemies. A team can have both primary and secondary tanks. The guy thanked Ruko and said that they were very lucky to have him ready to help the 3rd Division. He said he would notify him when the time came. Ruko chuckled awkwardly. Another guy said that Ruko needs to be given a break sometimes because he just finished helping another team. He said that if Tiana found out, they would be scolded badly. Ruko waved as he left and said that it was fine and he had nothing else to do anyway, and he could raise his level by helping them with the dungeons. He said he was going to get ready. The guy said that Ruko is really impressive. The guy in the steel helmet agreed and said that it was hard to imagine that this was the same person who used to be called Little. He said that before, Ruko was a rookie that no one wanted to deal with. He asked if he remembered that monthly guild war. The guy said he never wanted to team up with him, and they all ran away as soon as they saw him. Looking at Ruko, who was looking at the game's interface with a serious look, they remembered his crying face. The other guy replied that he remembered, but now no one dares to look down on him or call him Little Ruko, only Ruko Zong or even Brother Zong. He said that even though he is no longer affiliated with the 3rd Division and is now a member of the Shadow Group, thanks to Tiana, he sometimes comes to help them. He said that otherwise, with his current abilities, he would be able to become a core player for the 2nd or even 1st Division guild. The guy in the helmet agreed and asked if he had heard the news about the Shadow Leader. He said that this thief who made a fuss recently seems to have gone missing. Another guy wrapped his arms around his neck and told him to keep his voice down because it was about their guild's reputation. He said he'd heard about it from his buddies. Frowning, he said that this thief seemed to be the steamrolled by his head of the Wolf's Fang Guild, and no one had seen him for a whole month. He suggested that he might be too ashamed to show himself in front of others. Ruko stood silently with a sad face. He thought that he hadn't been able to contact Ling Si for a whole month. Ruko thought that he had become much stronger, just like Team Shadow. A dialogue box informed him that he had received a message from a friend. There was a chat dialogue on the dialogue box. Tillies asked about the fact that there was still no news about him. Ruko replied that there was no news. He said that he believed in him and Ling Si would definitely contact them. Tillies cursed and asked him what he was doing. She said that the job change task would have taken a maximum of 1 day, but it had already been a full month. She said she really wanted to scold him. Tilly said that Dark Feather is also asking about this, and she is afraid that if Ling Si doesn't show up soon, then Team Shadow will have to disband. Ruko looked sadly at the chat dialogue box. Ruko replied that he believed in Ling Si. Tilly's was standing near the rocks, looking at the dialogue box. Above her head, you can see that she has reached level 27. She thought that when this guy showed up, he would definitely beat him up. Tilly's thought that he had been offline all this month without any news. She wondered if he'd abandoned his account. Frowning, she thought that if he returned now, it would be too late for him to catch up with their levels. She thought that because of the number of job changes over the past month, leveling up had become much easier, resulting in a wave of level grinding frenzy. Looking at the 15th level of Ling Si on the dialogue box, she thought that it put him on a par with low-level players. The armored guy shouted at her to stop slacking off and hurry up to deal damage. Frowning, he said that her father had asked him to look after her, and before that, he had given her too much freedom. Tilly's agreed, naming the man Uncle Quan. Holding her staff in both hands, she asked if they couldn't handle such a simple boss on their own. She said that there's no challenge at all. Quan shouted at her to stop talking and start dealing damage. Frowning, she agreed, and the staff in her hand was shrouded in yellow energy. She thought with a serious face that if Ling Si didn't show up again soon, then she would have to go back to work at the workshop. Coco Lai slammed her hands down on the table and asked how dare they. She said that this was no longer just the Wolf's Fang Guild entering their territory, but a clear act of provocation. Stillwaters clarified that she said they had invaded Station 3. Coco Lai said this was true, and they agreed to split the rewards for a guild-owned dungeon in this area in half. She said that there are a total of 6 checkpoint stations, and each of them gets 3. Coco Lai exclaimed that the guilds agreed that when the dungeon is fully released, they will fairly divide the rewards among themselves. Frowning, she shouted that their Station 4 had invaded their Station 3, which was closest to them, and if they didn't answer, Wolf's Fang might think Nebulous was afraid of them. Stillwaters asked how long it would be before this dungeon was released. Coco Lai replied that this dungeon is classified as a guild resource competition, and the release is approximately 1 week away. Stillwaters said that 1 week is enough for them to retaliate, but since they made the first move, he wants to do more than that. Folding his hands in front of him, he said that they would do to them what they had done to them. Tilting their head, Stillwaters said that they would invade and take over another Wolf's Fang Guild checkpoint, and it would also increase their dungeon profits in the future. Frowning, Coco Lai paused for a moment and said that the nearest station to them was Station 4 right next to them, but it was likely to be heavily guarded, and if they attacked by force, they would face heavy losses. They added that the station farthest from them would require them to pass through the abyssal terrain to get there, an option they would have to cross out. Stillwaters asked what had happened to Ling Si and Shadow. He said it's been a month and they haven't heard a word about them. Coco Lai replied that no one had heard from him after he entered the job change assignment, and Tiana was also very worried about not being able to contact him. Stillwaters said he hopes this guy doesn't disappoint him. He said that the success of their mission relies on Shadow setting up an ambush. Meanwhile, in the dungeon of the job change task, Ling Si stands surrounded by his clones. The faceless clone fell to the ground. Many fallen clones of the main character were hanging from the roof of the building. Ling Si exhaled heavily. The dialogue box reported that he had passed the 10th phase of changing his profession. The many clones of the main character in front of him started to disappear. Ling Si, covered in wounds, said that a month had passed. The clouds in the sky dispersed, revealing a clear blue sky, and Ling Si said that it was finally over. The dialogue box says, "Congratulations. By stacking all your awakening rates, you have obtained an awakening rate of 100%. You will be receiving a special reward." Smiling, the main character said that it was time to go back. He put his foot on the bridge railing. The sun was shining on his face. The ground was littered with dead Ling Si clones. The dialogue box congratulated him on completing the task of changing the thief's profession. The main character was enveloped in a pillar of blue light, rushing into the sky. The dialogue box reported that he had unlocked a dual-wield class ability. Looking at the dialogue box, the main character thought that his reward is a weapon. The dialogue box says, "Here is your reward for completing the mission, Bone Knife of the Undead Mercenary." On the dialogue box, there was an image of 2 daggers with a purple blade. Ling Si thought that this was much better than the extra 10 dexterity points he had obtained in his previous life. He wondered what grade this weapon had. A dagger appeared in his hand, and he raised his eyebrows in surprise. The dialogue box reported that the weapon's rank was whiteboard. Looking at the weapon in his hand, Ling Si cursed, asking why it was of the lowest rarity. He thought with a frown that all class-specific equipment obtained after changing professions could be divided into 7 grades, from lowest to highest: whiteboard, bronze, silver, gold, mithril, legendary, mythical. Ling Si thought that there was no need to say anything about mythical equipment, and just owning it could seriously change a player's fate. Frowning, the protagonist thought that whiteboard has absolutely no special attributes, and these are just ordinary items. He thought that the reward for changing professions is determined by the results of his performance during the task. The main character thought that he was sure that he deserved a better reward. The dialogue box says, "Bone Knife of the Undead Mercenary, a ceremonial dagger that hails from the abyss." Description: no one knows the specifics of this dagger's origins, let alone the identity of its forger. It is said to have been found in one of the stalls on the streets of the undead. According to the stall owner, Face Eater, he came across the dagger by sheer chance at the riverbank of the vast, spider lily-filled Bloodied River. Later, someone realized that the source of the Bloodied River is the mysterious Udadadar. Current grade: whiteboard. The main character was surprised to pay attention to this description. The dialogue box says, "You have triggered the mission. Dominion of the Mercenary Phase 1. Mission description: with Bone Knife of the Undead Mercenary equipped, defeat 300 elite enemies. Mission rewards: 1. The Gone Knife of the Undead Mercenary will be upgraded to bronze rank, changing the attributes of the weapon. 2. When equipped with the Bone Knife of the Undead Mercenary, you will be able to use the skill Dominion of the Mercenary. Skill description: Dominion of the Mercenary summons 3 undead warriors to battle with you. The attributes of the summoned undead warriors will be derived from the player's attributes. Mission progress: 0 out of 300. Ling Si, holding the daggers in his hand, thought that it might be improved. Clutching the dagger in his hand, he paid attention to the words on the first phase and wondered if this meant that they could be improved further. He thought about what would happen if he could upgrade this weapon to mythical grade. The fallen clones of the main character began to crumble into glowing fragments. Ling Si looked in front of him in surprise. Turning around, he saw that the other clone next to him was also beginning to crumble. The air in the location was filled with glowing shards rising up. The location around the main character started to disappear. He thought with a grin that in the end, he himself had lost count of how many of his clones he had defeated. Ling Si started flying through the blue space. A face shrouded in blue squares appeared in front of him. The dialogue box congratulated the main character on being successfully awakened. He thought that he had never heard of such a scenario in his previous life. He assumed it was because of his 100% chance of waking up. The face told him that he had completed a total of 10 phases and remained undefeated, even facing the attack of 1,536 of his clones in the final phase. It told him that he, a person who never once thought of giving up, was the first player to achieve a 100% chance of awakening. Ling Si thought with a raised eyebrow that, to his surprise, this electronic voice looked like a female's. The voice noted that he seemed to have other hidden powers. The main character was surprised to ask about hidden powers and said that he did not have them. The insignia on his waist began to glow brightly with yellow light. Taking it in his hand, he asked why Badge of the Glorious appeared on its own. The face said that's what he felt. He said that he was one of the candidates to become the Glorious One. Ling Si asked if that meant there were others besides him. The person replied that, in addition to him, there are 3 candidates to become the Glorious One. The main character thought that it didn't seem like this was a unique mission. He thought that ever since he received this mission at Sunfall Peak, he hadn't been able to find the time to search for related information. Thinking back to how Dark Lions had put his hand on his shoulder, Ling Si thought that from what Dark Lions had said, it was possible that he was so strong because he also had something similar. The voice said that now, as a perfect awakened who reached a 100% chance of awakening, he would receive a reward. The main character, wrapped in yellow energy, thought that he would finally get the reward for becoming the perfect awakened one. The voice congratulated him on becoming the perfect awakened one. The dialogue box described bonus sigil bestows the player with the attributes of 1 additional class. You may choose from any class apart from your current class. You will be allowed to learn the skills of the chosen class from now on. Looking at the dialogue box in front of him in surprise, Ling Si realized that it was dual class. The dialogue box says, please select an additional class apart from Thief as your sigil class. You may not change your selection, and the sigil will take effect immediately. Note, this means that any class-related rewards you receive in the future will apply to your current Thief as well as your chosen class. If any conflicts arise in the rewards, the system will prioritize the reward that applies to the Thief class. There was a huge dialogue box in front of the main character. The next dialogue prompt, note, as always, the damage of your sigil class skills will be determined by the associated attributes of the chosen class. Please select a sigil class. Suddenly, a light flashes in front of your eyes. Now, it splits into 4. You may select from Warrior, Archer, Mage, Cleric. The main character thought that he needed to calm down. He was thinking about which class to choose with a surprised face. Frowning tensely, he thought that this choice would significantly affect his future fate, and he should think carefully about his choice. Ling Si was hovering in the air in front of a huge dialogue box, and the person asked him to hurry up with his choice. The main character remained silent as his heart pounded with excitement. He thought that since he was a thief, the cleric and warrior classes didn't fit his playstyle, which focused on maximizing net damage and performing lightning-fast maneuvers. Frowning, he thought that he himself had never had any interest in these 2 classes. Ling Si thought that the thief class already had options for ranged attacks, and choosing the archer class would give him more variety in the number of ways he could deal damage from afar. This, he thought, fits perfectly with what he considered the ideal change. Looking at the class symbols on the dialogue box, he thought that only the mage was left. The main character grinned. Clicking on the dialogue box, he thought about the incredible magic damage, unpredictable enchantment attributes, and terrifying summoned creatures. He thought that this was exactly what he wanted from his second class. The dialogue box reported that he had selected the wizard class. In front of the main character was a purple mage symbol. A dialogue box informed him that he would be issued a mage sigil. The Magus purple sigil approached Ling Si's forehead. He thought that he would be the very first spellcaster thief. The dialogue box reported that he had received a Magus sigil. The purple sigil dissolved on his forehead. The main character was enveloped in a bright yellow light. The face said that he was now an awakened one. Ling Si extended a hand that was shrouded in yellow energy. The dialogue box congratulated him on becoming the perfect awakened one. Yellow energy was dissipating around the main character, who was standing with his hand outstretched. Grinning, he said that it was time for him to go, and Ruko and the others must be worried waiting for him. Job change lobby. The portal began to glow blue. The main character came out of it. He thought about how it had been a full month since he had last seen another living creature. He thought that he couldn't believe that this was making him feel emotional. Scratching his head, he thought that he still had a slight itchy feeling on his forehead, but at least it looked like the mage sigil had been concealed. Ling Si thought that he was glad that it could be hidden, otherwise a similar thing on his forehead would attract a lot of attention. The dialogue box reported that it has unread messages from friends. He thought they must be from Tiana since he had been away for so long. The main character opened his eyes in surprise. A huge number of dialogue boxes appeared in front of him. A guy in the crowd exclaimed that he had an incredible amount of alerts. Another guy asked if he owed someone money, and loan sharks got to him in Heavenland. The main character looked around worriedly. The dialogue box said, "You have 432 unread messages from Ruko Zong. You have 69 unread messages from Tilly's. You have 3 unread messages from Pure Dark Feather. You have 3654 unread messages from Tiana." The main character asked if Tiana finally lost it. He thought with a smile that all the messages were from Ruko saying that he was worried. He thought that he had finally learned to worry about others. Ling Si thought Tilly's was furious. He opened messages from Dark Feather. The dialogue box shows that he sent him one message once a week, containing one word each. Chuckling awkwardly, the protagonist thought that he thought so. He asked what those more than 3,000 messages from Tiana were. He stared at the dialogue box in silence. Clouds drifted across the sky above the roof of the building. Ling Si, sitting on the steps, thought that he seemed to have learned about everything that happened outside in the month that he was gone. He thought there was a bit of nagging in between. Frowning, he thought about Wave of Level Grinding Frenzy. He thought that it looked like he was far behind in terms of level. He noticed Tiana's message on the dialogue box. The people from Wolf's Fang have become increasingly arrogant. Relying on the fact that their number of post-promotion members are a little more than ours, they've invaded out checkpoint station number 3 of the guild-owned dungeons. The guildmaster is asking for assistance from Shadow. Ling Si thought it was about Wolf's Fang again. On the dialogue box was a message from Tiana. "I hear Celestial and Wolf's Fang are now allied. That would explain their recent attitude." It's all rather fuzzy. Ling Si, it's been a whole month, when are you coming back? The protagonist frowned as he thought about how Celestial and Wolf's Fang had become allies. He thought that he didn't recall them working together in his previous life. He thought that, of course, not everything would be exactly the same as in his previous life, and he would have to pay attention to these changes. Closing the dialogue box, the protagonist exhaled. Straightening up, he said gravely that he was back. Guild-owned dungeon, Station 3. The armored beastman shouted that he would send the people from Wolf's Fang back to where they came from. The guy informed him that they had more troops and resources, and they should continue requesting reinforcements from headquarters. They turned around, gritting their teeth when they heard a voice prompting them to call for reinforcements. The voice asked if they were afraid. There was a crowd of people outside their walls, and one of them laughed and said that his gang of 50 brothers and he couldn't wait any longer. A mustachioed man with blonde hair said that they had already requested support, and their comrades were rushing here right now. He said that teleportation was forbidden here, so they would need some time. He told everyone to hold on, because reinforcements from the second station are already coming. The guy with the staff told the captain that he had been fighting non-stop for 2 hours straight, and they were running out of consumables. He said that the opponents continue to send wave after wave against them, immediately replacing the groups as soon as they are exhausted, and they gradually reach their limit. The man with the mustache shouted that the enemy had planned this for a long time in advance and caught them off guard. He said that I just need to be held until reinforcements arrive. The guy in the steel helmet said that it wasn't that they didn't want to hold on, but they wouldn't be able to hold on. He said that at this rate, they would all be sent to the cemetery. The dark-haired guy laughed and asked what was wrong. He said that even his teammates didn't want to fight anymore. He grinned and asked where their brotherhood was now. Laughing, the guy said that the members of the Nebulous Guild were worthless. The mustachioed man, swearing at the Wolf's Fang Guild, said that they broke the peace between their guilds and attacked their checkpoint station, and yet dare to say such things. A guy with dark hair asked if they use their brains when they play games. He said it was called strategy. Folding his arms, he told them to quickly call for backup if they wanted to say that Wolf's Fang was hurting them. Laughing, he added that he couldn't bear to look at how pathetic they were anymore. They noticed a voice that agreed and said there was no point in talking to small fries from Wolf's Fang. He furiously asked who had interfered with their conversation. The main character, sitting on a tree, said that since this is a planned attack, they must have some goal in mind. A guy in the crowd asked if it was one of them. The guy in the helmet asked why they only sent one guy. Ling Si jumped to the ground and said that they were deliberately provoking them with words, but refrained from attacking, and it was all to slowly exhaust them. He said it would play into their hands if they called in reinforcements from other checkpoint stations, because it meant they would weaken the fighting force at the remaining stations voluntarily. The main character said that if this happens, Wolf's Fang will most likely launch an all-out assault, which will cost them at least 2 checkpoint stations. Turning around, he asked the captain if this was true. Startled, the captain wondered who the thief was. He wondered if he didn't look like one of the stations nearby, and if he was from headquarters. The captain thought that what he said sounded very plausible, and those rascals from Wolf's Fang would do anything to win. He decided that he needed to notify his comrades at other stations. The captain asked the main character what his level was. He added that he had never seen it before. He thought that this thief had a completely different aura, and he was definitely a professional sent by the guild. Turning around, Ling Si replied that he was level 15 and had just been promoted. They looked at him in disappointment. The beastman furiously asked if he was seeking his own death with this level. Another guy tearfully said that all the people defending the checkpoint station were promoted and have at least level 23. He asked what a level 15 like him was doing here. The guy with the dark hair laughed and said they were just something. He asked the main character if he came to be a mascot for good luck. He asked who he thought he was. Ling Si quickly put a dagger to the guy's throat and asked, "So what if he's only level 15? Startled by his speed, the guy asked when he did it. Grinning, the main character said that there are all 50 people here. He said that he would be able to test his new weapon on them. The beastman asked in surprise when this level 15 guy managed to rush over there. The captain asked in surprise what he was thinking. Frowning nervously, he asked if he had hit his head to rush into such a large crowd of people. The dark-haired guy gritted his teeth and wondered if he had heard correctly that he was level 15. He thought that from the way he moved, it didn't look like it was true. Frowning, he thought that he was level 25 and would just destroy this brainless thief to show off his strength in front of his brothers. Jumping back, he exclaimed that it looked like they had someone stupid here. He asked if he was forcibly making villains out of them, Wolf's Fang. He told him not to cry afterwards about being mobbed, because he would defeat him himself. The guy behind him told him to show him. The main character thought that he was used to fighting large groups after spending so much time fighting his clones, and charged out of reflex. A sword appeared in the dark-haired boy's hand, and he urged him to end it quickly, because he didn't have time to waste on the likes of him. Grinning evilly, he thought that he had just returned from a career change and decided that he was invincible. Chuckling, he wondered why such cocky newbies like him kept popping up. He thought that he would show him the cruelty of reality, and it would be a good deed on his part. Swinging his sword, he used Swift Blade Judgment. Ling Si thought about the fact that he was a warrior and he needed to watch out for his melee skills. The boy swung his sword. He noticed the main character's movement in surprise. Slamming the dagger into the opponent's arm, Ling Si knocked the sword out of his hand. Blood gushed out of the guy's hand, and he wondered how he was able to accurately hit between his finger while he was using his skill. Opening his mouth in surprise, he thought about the incredible agility and reaction speed needed to interrupt his skill in such a way. The boy thought that the slightest inaccuracy would be enough to prevent him from interrupting him. Looking at the main character, he wondered why he was so confident. Above the dagger swings was written 0.75 seconds. The main character struck the enemy with a dagger, hitting weak points and dealing critical damage. The boy's eyes were blank. He fell to the ground next to Ling Si, and the people around asked in surprise about how he had defeated him in one hit. The main character frowned and thought that he was too slow, and every one of his actions, even his breathing, was full of openings. He thought that this was equivalent to him standing still. He thought that it looked like he was too used to the speed and frequency of his clones, and even their movement was carefully calculated, and every attack and defense was executed flawlessly. When he opened his eyes, he thought that if his actions had been even a second slower, he would have easily been destroyed in one hit. The main character thought that in comparison to them, the abilities of ordinary players are simply insignificant. Standing with a dagger in his hand and a serious expression on his face, he told the other guy that it was his turn now. He told him to get ready and thought that they were too weak in comparison. The captain asked what the situation was. The guy in the helmet said it looks like things are escalating. The beastman said that it looked like that level 15 thief was finished. There was a cloud of dust in front of them. The man in the dust cloud shouted to hurry up and spread out. He ordered the mages and archers to move back. Another person shouted that he needed shields, and this thief was too fast. The beastman said he would take a look. He added that they raised a storm of dust. Another guy told him to try not to be surrounded by them. The main character fought with people from Wolf's Fang, kicking one of them in the back. A guy in the crowd shouted that they needed to stay away from him. The beastman exclaimed in surprise. He asked how this was possible. Ling Si, surrounded by a cloud of dust, stabbed the attacking people in the back with a dagger. The armored guy frowned and shouted, "Don't be afraid, because it's just one person." The guy with the elf ears said in a frightened voice that he wasn't scared, he just couldn't aim. The main character defeated another guy in a wizard's hat, and the guy said that he needed to take aim before he could attack him. Another guy replied that his speed could be compared to the best thieves in their guild and even Squirrel. He said that his level should be very high. Ling Si, still fighting, apologized and said that he was level 15 and had recently promoted. The guys were shouting while the main character was hitting them. Ling Si stood in the midst of a scattering cloud of dust, surrounded by the defeated enemy. The mage shouted that his attacks were terrifying. He ordered them to surround him. The other guy ordered the mages to use magic shields. The main character, looking to the side, thought that after promoting, his damage and critical damage multipliers increased several times. He wondered if it was because he had become the perfect awakened one. He thought that, on top of that, any attacks on weak points dealt double damage, and these people were completely unprepared for defense and their equipment was silver grade at best. The main character thought that even their tanks couldn't hold up after he dealt them a few blows. He thought that the main event would start when the guild-owned dungeon is released. Ling Si thought that in order to conserve their strength, it was unlikely that they had sent their professionals here. Grinning, he thought that no guild would send their best players on such a low-level provocation mission. Jumping up to attack, he thought that he was using them to help him get used to this state. The boys exclaimed that he was attacking. The other guy shouted hold on and said that they had already requested reinforcements. He said that their brothers from the nearest checkpoint station number 4 are already running here. The beastman opened his mouth in surprise and asked about the fact that they were destroyed by a thief of only the 15th level. The captain shouted to the Wolf's Fang people that they had underestimated them. Shouting that this was their chance, he ordered everyone to attack. They ran to the place where the main character is fighting with the people from Wolf's Fang. The voice asked what they were doing here. He said that he couldn't believe that he had to come here to save them. The people from Nebulous turned around in surprise. Captain of Checkpoint Station Number 4, Level 28 Berserker folded his arms and asked if their mission wasn't just to provoke them. He is dressed in black armor, has white hair and a scar on his face. Someone exclaimed in surprise that reinforcements from Wolf's Fang had arrived. The people from Wolf's Fang turned around and cheered that their captain had come. The guy shouted to his companions to hold on, because this thief was just taking advantage of their weak formation. He ordered them to regroup with the captain and turn the tide of battle. Ling Si calmly looked ahead. The beastman asked the captain if they would be joining the battle. The captain frowned and said that he was a berserker, and that this was a special subclass of warrior that might or might not appear during promotion. He said that it gives the player berserk mode, as well as double resistance and an incredible attack power that surpasses that of a normal warrior. Gritting his teeth, he thought that he was unlucky, and after the promotion, he turned out to be an ordinary armored warrior. He thought that although their in-game performance wasn't much worse than Berserk's in the early game, Berserk was indeed better than him in every aspect. The main character, standing next to them, said with a grin that it was a berserker. He told the captain that it would be too much for him. The captain angrily shouted that he didn't need his reminder. The boy shouted that their archers were coming. Many yellow magic arrows shot down from the sky. The captain called out to the protagonist to see what he had brought upon them. He ordered the mages to activate their magic shields. A rain of yellow arrows hit the magic barrier. The mage said that their arrows were too relentless and they didn't have enough mana. Berserk closed his eyes and thought that for a talent like him, serving as the captain of an advanced station was a waste of time. He thought it was boring and he wanted to get it over with as soon as possible. Berserk thought that, as usual, they would break their formation with a few waves of ranged attacks, then lead the charge to beat them in close combat. He thought that with his Berserk fighting power, it would be very easy. He opened his eyes and someone shouted at him to turn around. Someone used colossal mountain pressure, and a burst of yellow energy scattered the ground and people. The main character said he was here, and he thought it would take him longer. The captain looked ahead in surprise. Ruko said with a grim grin that if it was a challenge from Ling Si, it would certainly come at lightning speed. He looked ahead with a grin. Yellow arrows continued to rain down from the sky, and someone shouted not to let this little to escape. Ruko, standing with a shield in front of the main character standing behind the magic barrier, said that he ran here as soon as he received a message from Ling Si, so he didn't have time to respond. The main character said that because he didn't answer, he thought he was in a dungeon. He said it looked like he had grown up a bit. He asked if his equipment was silver grade. Ruko smiled awkwardly and said it was a mix of different sets and he didn't have many good options right now. Frowning, he came to his senses and asked the protagonist where he had been all this time. He exclaimed that he had been gone for a whole month, and he was very worried because he disappeared without saying a word. The captain ordered the mages to continue using their spells. The main character, grinning, said that he had a little problem when he was going through the task of changing his profession. He said there was nothing to worry about since he was back. Ruko said that Tana was terribly worried and he'd better see her after they were done here. Ling Si replied that he would do so. Remembering the face of Vankafis, he said that he also needed to visit Vankafis. He said that he was too busy lately. Raising an eyebrow, he said that he had given her all the materials she needed and was curious about how she was doing. Ruko said that the last time he saw her, she said something about wanting him to stop by when he had time. Smiling, he said that he thought he had something to tell him, but he had forgotten about everything else. Chuckling, he said that they would swear at him. Grinning, Ling Si said that he would go there when they were done here. The captain angrily shouted at him not to stand and talk, but to help him. The beastman asked the captain about Little War. The captain said it was Ruko from Shadow. He asked me what he was doing here. The beastman said that he had heard that he was particularly active in the 3rd Division recently, and there were members of the 2nd Division who had personally invited him to help them. He said that he seems to have become very strong after promoting. He said that there were people even from the 1st Division who invited him to join their team permanently, however, he turned them all down. Frowning, he said that it was something that people could only dream of. He asked what he was doing. The captain said that he had heard Ruko refer to this thief as Brother Ling Si. He asked if he was the head of the independent Shadow team. Looking at the main character's back, the captain asked if he didn't quit the game because no one had seen him for a whole month. The guy shouted to Berserk that they were ignoring him. Cursing, the Berserker said that he didn't even know that they were going to die soon. He said he uses them to break his boredom. Pointing a finger at the dark-haired guy, he told ranged DPS to attack from where they were standing, and targets like them were like glass cannons. He ordered the others to follow him. Everyone obeyed. Wrapped in red energy, he called for an end to them. Berserk used surging battle intent. Frowning, he looked ahead. The dialogue box described surging battle intent, active skill, greatly increases damage output for a short duration. The user will gain battle intent from attacking, and when the gauge is full, Raging Smash may be unleashed. Standing in front of the Berserker shrouded in red energy, Ling Si started talking about them leaving the Berserker to him. Ruko interrupted him and said with a smirk that he would take the Berserker on himself. He said he was leaving the others to him. Ling Si looked at him in surprise. Smiling, he thought that he had completely forgotten that he had grown up. He thought that in his previous life, he was after all the almighty sacred mountain Ruko Zong. The beastman asked the captain about the two of them going forward and what they should do. A sword appeared in the captain's hand, and he said they were mad. He ordered everyone to follow him. He shouted that they can't let others talk, that they only know how to look from the side, and they are also strong opponents. The captain used Vigorous Brilliance. The dialogue box described Vigorous Brilliance, or a skill, grants a boost to both physical and magical defense while increasing movement speed. The more allies there are within the aura, the stronger the defensive buffs. Effects from the same aura cannot stack. The guy shouted that they would show them what they're not to be messed with. They ran into battle. Running past Ling Si, the armored guy agreed and shouted to the opponents to attack. Ruko was standing in front of the nebulous men, frowning and holding out his shield. The main character jumped to attack the people from Wolf's Fang. Frowning, he thought that he still hadn't asked if Ruko was promoted to any special subclass after the job change quest, nor about the changes in his attributes. He thought that his greatest strength was his blessing of bravery. Looking down, Ling Si thought that Ruko had a long way to go before he could fully master his blessing. Ruko was running towards the Berserker shrouded in red energy. The main character thought that he should try not to get beaten up by Berserk because they are a very strong subclass in the early game. He thought he wanted to see what he was capable of now. Ruko blocked the Berserker's strike. Berserk frowned and said that he thought because of huge fanfare that he was some professional player and he was just a level 25 runt. Laughing, he said that he, a level 28 Berserker, would teach him how to play as a warrior. Blocking the blow with a shield, Ruko said that level 28 is not bad, but it's not good enough to teach him how to play. He said that maybe he would teach it himself. Ruko's shield, shrouded in yellow energy, increased, pushing the opponent back. The blow of yellow energy pushed the Berserker away, and he laughed. Ruko gritted his teeth, frowning. Shrouded in red electricity, the Berserker said with a malicious smile that he was just a little fool who didn't even have his hair fully grown. He said he would teach him instead of his parents. He swung his axe, and Ruko blocked the blow with his shield. Using Raging Smash, Berserk said that he will rearrange Ruko's face with this. Swinging his axe, he leapt at Ruko. With a forceful impact, it left a crater in the ground. Seeing Ruko standing in the dispersing cloud of dust, he was surprised to think that he was able to withstand his Raging Smash without using any skills. He wondered why he felt like he was getting stronger. Ruko frowned at him from behind his shield. The main character thought that Ruko had an interesting shield in his hands. Stepping forward, Berserker gritted his teeth as he thought about how this little guy was holding something so heavy in his hands. Ruko raised a huge fur-covered hand with a grin. He hit his opponent with it, sending him flying backwards. A dialogue box informed Berserker that his weapon was broken. Gritting his teeth in surprise, he wondered if this was a joke. A huge Ruko, wrapped in yellow electricity, asked who was small now. The axe in the Berserker's hands was broken in half. The guy, looking at Ruko's huge silhouette, asked why this guy could transform. Ruko, standing in front of the Berserker, asked again who the little one was now. The Berserker asked what the skill was. Dropping to one knee, he asked if this is some kind of special post-promotion subclass. He asked if it was a special subclass of warrior. Ruko said with a smirk that he didn't deserve the right to see his subclass. He swung his huge arm. Using Gaia output, he hit the ground hard. The dialogue box says, immobilized. The Berserker stood surrounded by rocks that rose from the ground. A guy in the crowd shouted that ground has collapsed. Another guy shouted that it was dot skill and they needed to get out of here. Jumping over them, the main character said that ground has collapsed indeed. The people on the ground were shrouded in yellow electricity. Ling Si said with a smirk that it was time to clean up. Using the throat slasher, he struck enemies with daggers. A level 25 guy coughed up blood in front of the main character who was shrouded in blue energy. Ling Si thought with a frown that it looked like his low-level skills from the early game didn't deal enough damage, and it looked like he wouldn't be able to finish them off this way. He thought that he would have to replace all the skills he got before promotion. Ruko jumped forward and shouted that he would take care of the others. In front of the main character, a huge cloud of dust rose, throwing the enemy into the air. Ruko hit the ground, scattering people and rocks. A berserker littered with rocks while lying on the ground said he was careless. Ruko asked about the fact that he was careless. The berserker looked at him as it disappeared. Ruko, standing straight in front of him, said with a smirk that if he was offended, he was always ready to fight again. Ling Si, landing next to him, said that he did a great job and only small things remained. Ruko, shrinking, said that he can't lose face like this. Grinning, he gave a thumbs up and added, especially when Ling Si is around. A voice called out to the captain. The main character said that they leave the rest to them and leave. The captain thought that with such terrifying stats and skills, these two would surely be able to take down these Wolf's Fang guys even without their help. He called to them to wait. He asked if they would participate when the guild-owned dungeon opens in a week's time. Turning around, the main character replied that he would think about it. Ruko said his goodbyes. The beastman told the captain that he was confident that with their help, the chances of winning would increase significantly. The captain raised an eyebrow and said that especially this level 15 thief, because the way he played, it felt like he was a level 50 pro at least. He shouted that the conversation was enough and called for dealing with the remnants of the people from Wolf's Fang. Someone shouted at them not to run away. Another person asked if they were real heroes. Ruko, washing his hands in the river, said that they would have to walk a good distance to the teleport from here. The main character asked what his post-promotion subclass was. Ruko replied that it was difficult to pronounce it. He read from the dialogue box that his subclass is Warrior, the Blessed Beastman of the Sacred Mountain. Ling Si remained silent and thought that because of his blessing, he received a complimentary subclass after his promotion. He thought that he could never have imagined being so close to a legendary person like Sacred Mountain Rukozong in his previous life, but now they are indeed comrades. He thought that the Ruko legend had just begun. Ruko chuckled and said that there wasn't much other information about it, and it's signed as growth type. He asked if it was possible that it knew that it had just turned 12 this year. He asked, how is he supposed to go about growing? The main character said how good it is to be young. Turning around, Ruko said that he spoke as if he was an old man. He asked if he had told Tiana that he was back. He said he was very worried. Ling Si said he sent her a message but would look for her later. He said he needed to see Vankafis before he went offline. He said he could go first if he was busy. The main character thought that a currency exchange system was recently released in a state-sponsored game, Heavenland. You can link your bank account to the game account. However, only gold coins can be exchanged, and at the moment one gold coin is equivalent to $1,000 in real life. Other in-game equipment and resources were adjusted accordingly. Ling Si thought that he had spent quite a bit of his own money on the Vankafis potion shop, and the shop's rental period would soon end. He thought about how, on top of all that, there was the cost of furniture and equipment. The main character thought that he now does not have a single gold coin, and he hopes that Vankafis got used to his business. He thought it was time to visit her. Ling Si thought that he almost forgot because of the job change assignment. But the deadline for a debt of $1.5 million is also close. Frowning, he thought that he needed to find a way to get his hands on this money as soon as possible before it came to them. He thought that awakened players could earn a lot of money in the world outside, but he had never been an awakened one in his past life, so he didn't have any experience. He thought it was just a financial crisis. With an awkward grin, Ruko asked the protagonist if he was going to join Vankafis. Blushing slightly, he said that he would also go if he wasn't busy. Ling Si silently looked at him with a smile. He called for him to follow. Ruko agreed with a smile. Casfado's commercial leasing street. A man in line at the counter shouted to someone that this was his last warning. He demanded that he stop pushing. Another asked if he didn't have enough spare parts in his head. He asked if he could see who was climbing out of line. The man behind the counter shouted about the last 10 bottles. Vankafis, holding potions in her hands, reminded with a smile that there is only one potion per person and she writes them all down. She said that if they buy for the first time, prepare the money first. She asked how much of Type C they had left. The person stirring the contents of the huge vat replied that there were 6 left, and they each had 3 Type A and Type B. Vankafis told them to prioritize restoring the Type A quantity to 12 bottles. She thanked them for their hard work and said that she would raise their pay for tonight by 30%. The boys with sparkling eyes obeyed and thanked him. Ling Si walked up to the counter and suggested that he must be allowed to pass out of line. The guy in the queue exclaimed in displeasure, "What is he doing?" Vankafis, without turning around, started asking him to go back to the back of the queue. The main character called out to her, and she turned around. Ling Si stood in front of her with a smile on his face. After releasing the potions, she happily exclaimed that he had finally arrived. The main character asked that she wants to open other branches of the store. He said the store had been open for less than 3 months. He asked her if she was sure. Vankafis responded positively and said that this job was too much for her to handle alone, so she took the initiative and hired 3 assistant alchemists. She said that she acted based on the principle that more labor yields more output. She said that even though their productivity has increased, it is obvious that they need more labor. The protagonist saw books and potions scattered around the Vankafis table, and she said with an awkward smile that because she couldn't contact him, she decided to allocate some of the profits to procuration of more ingredients. She said that if possible, she would like to improve and expand the store as well as hire experienced alchemists, otherwise it would be a pity if they couldn't keep up with the large flow of customers. Ling Si said that he understood the general gist. He asked if she could give him an overview of the so far potion sales business. Sitting on a crate next to the main character, she said that after a period of trial and error, her chance of success in alchemy increased. But at first, the store didn't have an influx of visitors, so she spent some money to hire people to advertise. She said that, to her surprise, it worked well, and more people started coming to buy her potions. She added that since there was a long way to go before realizing the business vision of the Ling Si Empire, she decided to go all in and hired 3 rookie alchemists. Vankafis said that they learned very quickly, and although the store's performance improved, she couldn't help but feel that Ling Si would be disappointed with such a pace. She said that as soon as he had the rights to improve and expand the store, she was very worried about talking to him about it. She explained that this way they will be able to expand their business and hire new workers. Ling Si was surprised to think that she had an impressive business acumen. He thought that the Vankafis from his previous life had made a name for herself solely through her potions. However, it seemed that there were more things that helped her earn the title of Alchemist Emperor. The main character asked how much profit their store had made up to this point. Waving her arms awkwardly, Vankafis said she was going to start talking about it. She said that she even applied to link the profit to Ling Si's player ID, but this can only be done with his permission. She said that there are records of every transaction, and if they add up all the profits for today, it comes out to 363 gold and 65 silver. The main character and Ruko paused in surprise. Vankafis frustratedly told Ling Si that she had let him down and her goal was 600 gold. Smiling awkwardly, the protagonist said that it wasn't bad and she needed to keep working. He thought that he expected nothing less from Alchemist Emperor. Ruko was surprised to say that, compared to gold farmers, who continuously fight all day to earn a couple of silver coins, this is impressive. Ling Si, imagining himself lying in a pile of money, thought that it looked like her demands on herself were much higher than anything he could imagine. He thought that it looked like his investment in potions would make an incredible profit, and if he successfully opened the store's branches, he would be able to make more investments when virtual real estate launched. He thought that he would become a rich landlord in Heavenland. After clearing his throat, Ling Si turned to Vankafis. There was a send contract button on the dialogue box. He said that starting today, he wants to sign an official employment contract with her, according to which she will be paid 30% of all the store's profits. The main character said that he saw what she was capable of, and he has faith in her judgment. He said that 30% of the store's profit also includes profits from all future branches, and he will cover the cost of improving the store, hiring workers, and training them. He told her to just do what she was doing and let him know if she needed anything. Vankafis exclaimed happily and started counting how much money dozens of stores would bring her. Ling Si gave a thumbs up and said that it was all right and she would become a rich woman in the future. Vankafis happily said it was too much. Getting up from the box, the main character said that whether this can happen depends on her efforts and diligence. He said with a smile that even though money was important, her original goal was to show her worth to the world. With a confident smile, Vankafis raised her fist and said that she understood and she wouldn't let the money blind her. She said that she wanted to become the Alchemist Emperor that he described to her and wanted to implement his idea of a business empire. She said she wants to reach her potential and be the best version of herself. The bright-eyed Vankafis said that, after all, nothing is more important in life than achieving your goals. The main character looked at her with a smile. Ruko exclaimed about her piercing aura of aspiration. Ling Si told her, if she agreed, to sign the contract. He said that the terms of consent are described inside, and she doesn't need to call him boss anymore. Vankafis agreed, calling him the boss. The main character thought that this was the first time he logged out of the network after being promoted. The old man, noticing that he was up, called him to breakfast. He said with a smile that after breakfast they would need to talk about school. Ling Si raised an eyebrow after hearing about the school. His eyes widened with tension. Wrapped in yellow energy, he wondered what was happening to his body. He thought that his muscles and meridians were spamming violently. Gritting his teeth, the protagonist thought that the nerves in his brain were pulsing like crazy. Frowning, he realized that he was awakening. A yellow flash flashed in the darkness. A yellow energy enveloped his body, which shows his bones, and he thought that his body was evolving. The old man anxiously ran over to Ling Si, who was shrouded in yellow energy, and asked if he was okay. The main character wondered if awakening should be so painful. Clutching his neck, he shouted that he was in pain. He got to his feet, and the yellow energy pushed the old man into the wall. A pillar of yellow energy broke through the roof of the building, shooting up into the sky. A man in a business suit is walking down the street with a round device in his hand. He has white hair and beard, a hat on his head, and dark glasses on his eyes. Behind him, a pillar of yellow energy pierces through the clouds. Looking at the needle of the device shaking on the red zone, he said that this chance of awakening is frightening. He said it was even higher than the guy's performance from last time. Adolf said that if this awakening surge is even stronger than the last guy's, it's possible that this is the perfect awakened one. Looking up at the sky, he thought of the slums. As he stood among the crowd of people crossing the road, he thought that it looked like he needed to go there. An old man amidst a cloud of dust asked Ling Si if he was okay and what had happened. He heard a knock on the door. The man opened the door with his foot. It turned out to be a guy in a red shirt who was demanding money from them. He asked if they were trying to destroy this place before fleeing. Frowning, he said that 2 months had passed and time was up. The guy said he had been standing guard outside all day in case they tried to escape. He asked what that loud noise was. Pointing his finger at the old man, he demanded to give him his money, calling him a pathetic beggar. The old man looked at him worriedly. The main character, coming out of a cloud of dust, said that they are noisy. He asked who it was called Lolivs. The cloud of dust dispersed, and Ling Si told the guy to say it again. The white cat approached the dumpster. It started eating garbage. A cloud of dust rose in the building from the impact. The guy in the red shirt was standing in a half-crouch, surrounded by his fallen comrades. The main character asked why he wasn't talking anymore. The guy gritted his teeth, noticing his aura, and thought that he must be an awakened one. He thought that his aura was much stronger than the other awakened ones in their organization. He thought that he must have just woken up recently. He wondered why of all the days he had to meet him on the day of his awakening. The guy thought that today was not his lucky day. He thought ruefully that his performance rating for this month. The main character, standing in front of him, ordered him to speak. He thought that he needed to get out of here, and no matter how strong they were, ordinary people couldn't stand up to the awakened ones. He thought that the most important thing was to save his life. Walking back, the guy said that he would tell you everything. He said that he was blind for daring to make a fuss. He begged for mercy and said they were just doing their job. The old man asked Ling Si, peeking out from behind the door, what he was doing. Turning around, the protagonist told him not to worry because he was fine. The old man hesitantly replied that it was fine as long as he was fine. The guy, after bowing down to the main character, said that they were wrong to interrupt their breakfast, and he was just worried about completing the task assigned to them. He said that there are too many people who are not paying their debts lately, and this is a problem for them too. He said that they had no choice but to behave in this way. The guy added that if they couldn't raise the money they were supposed to raise, they would be skinned. He said that he must have heard of their boss's ruthless character since he was also from the slums. The main character said that he didn't really know anything about their boss. He told him to take him to him. The guy asked if he was serious. An abandoned building. The guy sitting on the throne asked if he wanted to say that he got hurt at such an important moment. He said the dark race was about to start. He asked where he could find another suitable awakened one to participate. Sitting on the throne was a guy in a white suit with a fur collar. His name is Chris, also known as Silver Viper of the East, one of the 4 heads of the slums, East District. Chris said he said it was a very important race. The guy with the cast on his arm apologized and said he was careless. This is an awakened one with a 12% chance of awakening. Its class is Armored Warrior. He said he lost his head after drinking with his brothers and insisted on driving. The guy said he was willing to risk his life for this. The shot hit the head of the guy behind him. Chris's gun was blowing smoke. He said he got behind the wheel drunk, crashed the car and broke his arm. He said that his chance of awakening was already less than his opponent's, and now he has no chance at all. He said that if it wasn't for the fact that awakened ones willing to volunteer for the dark race are hard to find, he would have ended up like that fool long ago. Chris said that even though he was an awakened person, he should be afraid of bullets. The guy crouched down, trembling, and said that he would definitely risk his life to win for him. He thanked him for sparing him. The guy, standing behind the other guys, asked if he had seen it. He said it was their boss, a man who would kill without a second thought, a man called the Silver Viper of the East. The guy in the red shirt said that they were finished and the competition that their boss was waiting for would be ruined. He said he must be in a terrible mood right now and he'd probably get shot too. Ling Si silently stared ahead, holding the guy's shoulder. Frowning, he assumed that the dark race was some sort of underground competition that only the awakened could participate in. He thought about how this competition was very important to this guy. He asked what if he would participate for him. The guy told him not to add fuel to the fire. Chris turned around. The guy with the cast asked who brought this newbie here. He said he didn't belong here to talk. The main character asked if he would tell him what class the opponent has and what are the conditions for victory. Chris raised the gun and asked if he was sure he was talking to him. The guy in the red shirt apologized and said that he had brought this client here. He said he brought him here to discuss his debt. Smiling awkwardly and trembling with fear, he said that he had jumped out on his own and it had nothing to do with him. Chris gritted his teeth, the veins in his face bulging, and said he was surrounded by fools. He fired his gun. The bullet started coming at the guy in the red shirt. The boy squeezed his eyes shut and tears came out. The main character held out his hand to the bullet. The guys in the crowd exclaimed in surprise. Chris's eyes widened in surprise. After catching the bullet, Ling Si said that he was right and it was none of his business. The guy in the red shirt fell to his knees in fear. The main character asked if they needed awakened ones who were willing to take part in the dark race for him. After letting go of the bullet, he said that he was sure that he would like his abilities. Chris frowned and shouted for everyone to get out of here. Chris asked about the $1.5 million. The main character said that if he won the contest, he would forget about the debt of $1.5 million. He asked what he thought. Chris chuckled and said that if he won this competition for him, even $5 million wouldn't be a problem, let alone $1.5 million. He said, cigar in mouth, that the dark race this time will be a big gamble with the Southern District. He said that if they win, the properties of the Eastern District will more than double, and they will be able to get unimaginable privileges. Chris said there were some things he needed to know first: his chance of awakening, the level in the game, and the awakened class. The main character thought that even though they are a spell thief, he hasn't received any spells yet, which is why he is just a common thief in practice. He said with a smile that he was level 15, he had just awakened, his chance of awakening was good, and he was a thief. Chris asked him what he meant by his chance of waking up is good. He asked if he was sure he would be okay with his level. She said that if he lost, there was a chance that he would die. He added that the dark race is very important to them all and he won't let anything go wrong. The main character told him not to worry and he just needs to keep his word. He said that when he won, his debt would be cleared. Chris frowned, wondering if that was their only choice. He thought that all the better awakened ones were poached by the state, and they gave them generous conditions and good treatment, not to mention those with a high chance of awakening. Chris thought that competitions like the dark race were forbidden by the state, and the awakened usually avoided having their records tainted so as not to interfere with their future careers. He thought that from what he had heard, their opponent was an archer with a 28% chance of awakening. Looking at the main character, he thought that from the way he was moving just now, this guy is quite agile and maybe he can really win. Chris called out to him. Ling Si asked where. Chris, with his back to him, asked if he wanted to take part in the dark race. Turning around, he said that she would be here tonight. The main character followed him, and Chris said that if they went now, they would arrive just in time. An expensive red car drives among high-night skyscrapers. The main character, sitting inside the car, thought about the awakened ones. Looking at his hand, he thought that he couldn't believe that he could actually catch a bullet with his bare hands. He thought that he just moved on instinct back then, and even though his palm still hurts a little, the awakened's potential continues to surprise him. Looking at the huge advertising banner, he thought that although he had never been able to awaken in his past life, he had heard a lot about it on the news in real life. The protagonist thought that he had heard news like how an awakened single-handedly destroyed a large terrorist group, or how two awakened people destroyed half the city when a fight broke out between them. He thought that back then, he had always thought that such things were incomprehensible and unrealistic. He thought that apart from the fact that they didn't have any game equipment, the awakened ones had all the game skills and stats in real life. Grinning, Ling Si thought that now he could sense on his own the infinite potential of an awakened one. Thinking back to Dark Lions, he thought that he was wondering what heights he could reach in real life if he could maximize his performance as a spell thief. He thought that he would take the #1 title in Heavenland out of his hands. The main character thought that he would become the best awakened not only in the game, but also in real life, and in this life he would change his life to the extreme. Chris thought, looking at the main character, that even though he knew he was going to be competing to the death, he didn't look nervous at all. He thought that he was as calm and collected as ever, and it was even impressive. He thought it was an incredible mentality for someone who looks 20 years old. The car stopped and Chris said they were there. A man in a black suit opened the gate to greet Chris. Pointing at Ling Si, he said that this guy was his hand. On the way down the stairs, the protagonist asked him if it was a code word. Chris replied that it was a secret dark slum battle arena open only to its members. He said that the people who come here are either incredibly rich or people who run districts like him. Chris said that since the rule states that they can only bring one awakened to be their right-hand man, they just shortened the name to Hand. Ling Si suggested that betting on each match here is related to unspeakable acts. Chris gritted his teeth and told him not to think that such bloody underground competitions only existed in the slums. He said that what happens here is nothing compared to dark match arenas in rich neighborhoods. Chuckling, Chris said that he just never saw it with his own eyes. He said that those who have money and power can do crazier things than people like them. The door in front of them opened with blinding light, and Chris said they were here. Ling Si squeezed his eyes shut as he passed through the door. In front of him was an arena surrounded by a crowd of people and lit up by many bright spotlights. Chris asked if he liked it. He said that here he hears the screams of the slum's most oppressed voices. He asked, doesn't this get him all fired up? The main character thought that he couldn't believe that such a huge place existed underground. Chris called to introduce him to the place. Ling Si thought that he had no desire to get acquainted with this place. A voice behind him called out to Chris and said that he had heard that he had made a bet with a smiling tiger. A guy with a black mustache and goatee and a pink suit asked why he had asked him to join in. His name is Fu Anzeng, also known as Pink Daddy, one of the 4 slum heads responsible for the Western District. Chris said it was the head honcho of the Western District, Fu Anzeng, who everyone calls Pink Daddy. He said that the smiling tiger he mentioned was the boss of the Southern District, and it was with him that he made a bet this time. Chris told Fu Anzeng that this is a case between East and South, and there is no need for the West to stick its nose in it. Fu Anzeng said that if they genuinely want to contribute, it's not out of the question. When he noticed the main character, he asked if it was his hand for today. He asked if it was the big guy from Crew Cut. Chris folded his arms across his chest and said with a grin that he had some circumstances and had to arrange a replacement. Fu Anzeng chuckled and told him to be careful because the smiling tiger had come prepared this time. He said that he had heard that he had hired an awakened warrior with a 36% chance of awakening from a rich area. Grinning, he said that he was very strong and had participated in 7 dark battles with 6 wins and 1 loss. Chris gritted his teeth and asked about the 36% chance of waking up. He thought that he had actually managed to find an awakened of this level. He thought that if it was still an awakened archer with a 23% chance of awakening, this guy would be able to use his speed to force a melee duel. But this is a warrior. Frowning, he wondered what would be difficult and if he could really count on this thief. Ling Si was looking at the arena. The voice announced that it was now the turn of tonight's headliner. The crowd cheered and raised their fists. The voice said that the next bet was between their boss, the Silver Viper of the East, and the boss of the South, Smiling Tiger. The voice announced that 2 awakened fighters were entering the ring. 2 silhouettes appeared in the arena. A voice shouted that on the left side of the ring, they had an awakened warrior known as Frankenstein, who had fought in 7 battles with 6 wins and 1 loss. Under the spotlight, a man with blue skin covered in stitches was standing there. Crowds loudly called him Frankie. The voice announced that on the opposite side of the ring, they had an awakened thief with no titles or combat experience. Ling Si stood under the spotlight with his hands in his pants pockets. A guy in the crowd laughed and said that Frankie would flatten this guy to death with 2 fingers. Chris clicked his tongue and gritted his teeth, saying it was going to be a tough fight. The man at the back told him that he really didn't know his limits. He said he thought he would take this bet much more seriously. He said that as his senior, he was very disappointed in him. Chris chuckled and said he knew he was old, but that doesn't make him his senior. Behind him was an elderly man in a black suit with a red shirt. His name is Lai Kai Ozi, also known as Smiling Tiger, one of the 4 slum heads in charge of the Southern District. Chris said they didn't know who would win yet. Standing next to him, Lai Kai Ozi said that this Frankenstein is a person he hired in a rich area, and whether it's experience or strength, it satisfies him in everything. He laughed, and Chris looked at him, gritting his teeth. The voice announced a battle without rules, regardless of life or death. The voice called for getting your gear ready. Various weapons started raining down on the ring. A voice announced the start of the battle. Frankenstein stepped forward. Using upheaval stomp, he kicked hard on the ground, causing objects in the ring to fly apart. The judge said he didn't seem like he was going to give his opponent a chance to find a weapon, and as expected of Frankenstein, he has a wealth of combat experience. He asked if the thief only had to retreat. Standing among the flying batons, the protagonist frowned and thought that he didn't think he needed a weapon to defeat him. He thought that with his current speed, he could at least catch bullets. Opening his eyes wide, he thought that if he was fast enough, he would be able to deal massive damage even with his bare hands. Frankenstein, grabbing a huge axe, told the protagonist that he would take his life with his axe. Fate exclaimed that Frankenstein was attacking. He asked if the thief could dodge his furious swing. Swinging his axe, Frankenstein leapt to attack Ling Si and told him that he was really out of his depths. He told him to move and asked him if he was too scared to move. The main character thought that there was only one thing left for him to think about. Frankenstein swung his axe in front of him, but to his surprise, Ling Si disappeared. His eyes widened in surprise. The main character ran behind him. He swung a fist that was shrouded in purple energy. The audience watched in surprise. Frankenstein stood shivering, foaming at the mouth. The referee announced in surprise that it was a one-punch knockout. Ling Si, standing in front of the opponent, said that the only thing he needed to think about was how much strength to use so that he wouldn't accidentally kill him. Frankenstein fell to his knees in front of the main character. He fell to the floor. The audience looked at the arena in surprise. The protagonist thought that it looked like this guy didn't put enough stat points into defense. He thought that if one didn't have the skills to make up for it, it was a bad idea for a warrior to focus solely on DPS. He thought that, otherwise, fighting a class with high damage after awakening would be dangerous. Smiling Tiger asked what had happened. Chris asked if he was imagining it, and he won. The voice announced the awakened thief's victory, praising his peerless strike. Ling Si left the arena. The main character told Chris to go because he had his own things to do. Chris gave him a thumbs up, complimented him on his good work, and thought it looked like he'd hit the jackpot this time. Grinning, he told Smiling Tiger that this was his victory. He said that their agreement would go into effect immediately, and from today on, people from his eastern district would do business in the designated areas of his southern district. He told him that he will be counting on his care. Frowning, Smiling Tiger cursed. The main character and Chris are driving around the city at night in a red car. Chris laughed and said it was nice. As he turned the steering wheel of the car, he asked if he had seen the face of the Smiling Tiger. Laughing, he said that he looked like he was choking. Chris said he was willing to bet that he wouldn't sleep tonight. He exclaimed that it was a great day. The main character reminded about their agreement. Chris asked him why he was still talking about this little thing. He said that everything is forgiven, and he will even give him 1 million as a personal gift, and refunds are not accepted. Looking at Ling Si, Chris thought that even though he was just awakened, but judging from his terrifying performance, this guy's future was immeasurable, and he'd better get along well with him. Ling Si thought that although he was sorry, he might owe him a favor, and he couldn't accept gifts that were given to him just like that, but he could ask for a favor. He said he accepted his good intentions, but he could keep the million. He said with a grin that his lackeys had made a mess of his old man's house. He imagined the guy in the red shirt saying that he was lying, and he made this mess himself. Chris put the phone to his ear and said it wasn't a problem and he didn't have to worry about it, because he would take care of everything, because it was his responsibility. Speaking on the phone, he said that he was talking about the apartment of this young guy and his old man. He said to deal with it according to protocol. Taking the phone away from his ear, Chris said that everything was done and he ordered his men to deal with it as quickly as possible. Grinning, he said that it was getting late and it was all on him today, and he would take him along to relax and have a good time. Chris said that thanks to him, today he has a few girls from an expensive neighborhood. He handed him the cigars. Ling Si thanked him and said that he did not smoke. He added that this method of relaxation is not suitable for him, and for him the best way to relax is to go home and get a good night's sleep. Chris thought that he was too innocent and it would be hard for him. He agreed and said that everything would be fine if he rested. He told him to contact him if he needed anything in the future, and as long as it was within his power, he would be happy to help him. Ling Si thanked him. Chris thought that he hadn't shown any fear towards him, the head of the Eastern District, from the very beginning. The main character said that the street where he lives is narrow, and he can drop him off at the corner. The main character was standing in front of a dark alley. He looked ahead in surprise. There was a shiny golden door in front of him, and he asked if they had overdone it. Ling Si knocked on the shiny door. A voice announced that he was coming. The old man opened the door and happily asked Ling Si that he was back. He asked if he was okay and if they had done anything to him. The main character asked what they could do. He said he didn't have anything to worry about and he just took care of their debt. Ling Si looked inside in surprise. Their house was richly furnished and gleaming with cleanliness. The old man said that about 10 large men had recently come in and they just went inside with their tools and got to work. He said he didn't know what they were doing and even thought he was going to die, but they just fixed their house and left without saying a word. The main character, remembering Chris who told him to rely on him, smiled awkwardly and said that it could be said that they were too effective. The old man asked him how he had dealt with the $1.5 million debt. He asked if they had forced him to do something bad. Ling Si replied that they didn't owe them any more money and he just did them a small favor and it's fine now. The old man with bright eyes thanked him and said that he wouldn't ask him anything else. Closing his eyes, he said that he also wanted to thank him on behalf of his deceased son. Ling Si was told that it was nothing special and he didn't need to worry about it. He said with a smile that if it wasn't for him, he would have starved to death on the street long ago. He asked if he had treated him like one of his own all along. He said he should thank him. The old man agreed and told them not to be so polite to each other because they were family after all. He reminded him that he had to report to the school tomorrow, and he filled out all the paperwork for him. He said that he took the initiative and recorded him as his grandson. The old man said that he managed to get a free place in the third high school under their welfare scheme. He said that young guys like him had better have some ink in their stomachs. The main character, sitting on a chair, looking at the paper in his hand, thoughtfully said about the third high school. He wondered intently if it was fate that he would go to third high school in this lifetime as well. He thought it was a place full of memories. The old man, remembering, said that they had replaced something for him, and he didn't really understand what it was, so he just put it away. He handed him the game helmet. Ling Si exclaimed that this is the second generation of the smart gaming headset. Looking at the helmet, he thought it was beautiful. The main character thought that this is a new second-generation gaming helmet, and it not only improves the realism of the experience inside the game, but also gives noticeable improvements in graphics and ease of operation. He thought that, on top of this, he could release more targeted neurocurrents during the game to regulate various body functions. After putting on the helmet, Ling Si thought that with the improved equipment, he could increase the accuracy of his micro-movements. He thought that this was something that he didn't even dare to dream of in his previous life, and if he remembers correctly, at the time of release, this helmet was selling for 120,000. He thought he'd better try twice as hard in the game. Ling Si told the old man that he would enter the game and he had better rest. The old man told him to try harder. Entering the game, the main character thought that, as expected from the second-generation gaming helmet, the tactile sensations became much more realistic. He grabbed the doorknob. Opening the door, the main character thought that the sensitive recoil became much clearer, and this will definitely help him in future battles. Tilly's was annoyed about how he disappeared for a month and now appears out of nowhere with such an attitude. Looking ahead, Ling Si thought that now that he had dealt with the problems in the real world, it was time to take care of the unfinished business here. Tilly's, Ruko, and Darkfeather all turned around when they noticed his appearance. Frowning, the protagonist thought that it was time for Team Shadow to regroup. Ruko happily exclaimed that Ling Si had come. Darkfeather said, "GG." Tilly's, with her hands on her waist, said that it was better for him to properly explain why he disappeared for a whole month. The main character thought that now their goal is to raise their place in the leaderboard in a week.